Mortgage rates are dependent upon the stock and the bond market. The government is really cracking down on these credit scores. The economy is crazy right now. My phone started blowing up. People are losing their jobs. If you are not the most competitive buyer, now may be the time for you to buy. You're hearing this whole thing about 0% interest rates. I mean, statistics are one thing, but I work in the industry day to day. Babies, welcome back to my channel. Or if you're new, my name is Sierra and I do videos on lifestyle and finance. I work full-time as a mortgage loan officer and I have helped hundreds of people to buy their home and to build wealth. And so I take what I know and what I've learned and I share it with you in hopes that it will empower you to also create wealth. So today's video is going to be a frequently asked question very much lately. How is the pandemic affecting the housing market and the mortgage industry? Should I buy a house now or wait until all this is over? All of your burning questions I'm going to answer in this video. So if you want to know how this pandemic is affecting the mortgage industry, how it affects you, and if you should buy or not, then stay tuned. So before I get into it, I want to give a big shout out to the sponsor for this video, which is Oxygen. Oxygen is a banking platform that lets you pretty much do it all. It acts as a debit card, you get cashback rewards, financial management tools, and it has a host of advantages over a lot of other debit cards. So for example, you can use your Oxygen card and get 7% cash back at places like Trader Joe's and Walmart. You can get 5% back on gas and you can get $1 back on food and beverage purchases. And what I really like about it is you can download the app, which coincides with your card, and you are able to use their financial management tools such as getting information on your spending, your upcoming bills, and your expected income. So it will help you budget and kind of have a financial overview of what things look like with your finances. And using your Oxygen Visa debit card, you can take out cash at over 55,000 ATMs with no fees. And if you lose your card, it's not a problem. You can instantly freeze it, or you can order a new card without a problem. Or you can cancel it with a click of a button on your Oxygen app. Anything that you can do to keep your finances secure and keep a good tab on your finances is really good. So I definitely recommend this banking platform and this debit card if you are in need of that. I will leave the link below for you guys to check it out. Again, the name's Oxygen, and thank you so much to Oxygen for sponsoring this video. Okay, so let's just get into it. 48% of real estate agents have noticed a decrease in buyer interest attributable to the coronavirus outbreak. I mean, statistics are one thing, but I work in the industry day to day. I'm currently working with clients that are buying homes. I was before the pandemic and I will be after. And so I wanted to give you guys what my view of this is. So the first thing that I want to say is I want to break some myths or commonly held beliefs right now about mortgages and the economy that are going on right now. And the first thing is about interest rates. You're hearing this whole thing about 0% interest rates. When the government put this out there, my phone started blowing up because people thought that meant 0% interest rates meant 0% mortgage rate. They're not the same. Basically, the 0% interest rates are going to big banks so that banks will lend out more money. That's kind of the easiest way to put it. But it doesn't mean that it's trickling down to mortgage rates necessarily. You should know that mortgage interest rates will probably never get that low, ever. First and foremost, you need to know mortgage interest rates are not at 0%, period. Rather than me telling you if you should or shouldn't buy a house, I came up with 10 questions for you to ask yourself that will help you determine if you should buy a house during the pandemic or if you should wait. And then at the end, I'm going to give you my tips for success if you are going to buy during the pandemic, and hopefully that will help you guys out. Okay, the first question to ask yourself is, can I afford a mortgage now. Clearly, the economy is crazy right now. So if you have lost your job or if you're in fear of losing your job, I mean, now's probably not a good time to buy a home. And you also have to take into account when you are buying a house, there's a lot of things that go into your mortgage. Even if you were to get a great rate, you still have to take into account you have your homeowner's insurance that goes in there, taxes, HOA fees, the flood insurance. Your mortgage is not just going to be related to the price of your house, it's also encompassing all of those things I just mentioned. So the very first question you want to ask yourself is, can I afford this? And that's something you want to ask yourself whether you're in a pandemic or not, right? You need to make sure that you can afford this mortgage no matter what happens. So if you were to lose your job next week, would you still be able to pay your mortgage? Yes, there is forbearance, but you are eventually still going to have to pay your mortgage. If you are at the point where you're like, do I want to jump into a mortgage? Make sure that you can afford it. And you also have to take into account closing costs, moving costs, things like that. This is regardless of being in a pandemic. You really just in general want to make sure you can afford it. Make sure you have money set aside for things that you don't even know that you're going to need, right? So you always need more, I found, when it comes to buying a house than you think you do. So if you just have tons of money saved, really good job security, then go for it. Like, now is probably a good time to buy, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Okay, and the second question you need to ask yourself is, what is the likelihood of your job continuance? One major issue I'm running into right now as a mortgage loan officer is that people are losing their jobs left and right. It is not a game out here. Mortgage lenders and the investors and the government does not care. They are cracking down on underwriting guidelines more than ever. If you are not employed at the time of your close, most of these lenders are not funding these loans.
Lightning has been detected nearby. Please find shelter.
That's creepy. Say that you're employed when you start the process and you get laid off, you are not going to be able to get that house. And so one huge question you have to ask yourself in this scenario is, what is the likelihood of you being able to keep your job? If you have a strong likelihood of keeping your job, you may be more apt to go ahead and buy right now. If you don't know, or if you're not an essential worker, you may want to wait. If there's any question in your mind of your likelihood of job continuance, then you should probably wait. The third question you should ask is, how much do I have saved? This kind of goes along with the first and the second question, but let's say, should you lose your job, do you have an emergency fund? Do you have 3 to 6 months of living expenses saved? Like, these are all things you have to think about when you're buying a house, because it's different than when you're renting. Because when you're renting, you pay one monthly rent payment and that covers everything. If anything breaks, if anything goes wrong, you are covered. When you are in a house, you are kind of like out there on your own. Like, if anything breaks, like, you have warranties and things like that, but for the most part, if anything breaks, you're responsible. There's just so many expenses that come along with the house. So I strongly say, if you have 3 to 6 months expenses saved, and or you have some kind of emergency fund saved, you're probably the kind of person that would benefit more from buying right now during the pandemic. If you don't have any money saved, that's one, not only going to be good for you in the long run with buying a house, but number two, let's just say that you have a lower credit score. Mortgage lenders are going to be looking at if you have money saved. That's actually something that can help you get approved if you're at a lower credit score, especially during this time period. The lenders will want to see that you have 3 months of reserve saved, meaning 3 months of your monthly mortgage payment saved. If you don't at least have that, you probably should not be buying right now. Number 4, what is my credit score? This is a huge one. The federal government is cracking down with this pandemic that's going on. They're cracking down on credit scores. So if you have a credit score below 640, most lenders are not even funding loans right now. I have borrowers who are at like a 620 or below that credit score that were fine before the pandemic, that now we may only have 1 or 2 investors out of 25 that we can send them to, and it's really
has been detected nearby. Please find shelter.
Yeah, so apparently there's a tornado coming here tonight, which, yeah, but whatever. Be really cognizant of what your credit score is. If you are below a 640, whereas before the pandemic you may have had an easier time getting approved and buying a house, you may not even be able to buy a house right now. The government is really cracking down on these credit scores. So really ask yourself and pay attention to what your credit score is looking like, because if you are below a 640, you may need to wait until all of this kind of dies down in order to buy. But if you are at a 640 and above, then this may be the time to buy, and I'm going to talk about that in a little bit. Fifth question, will I be safe? Going to look at houses is kind of a scary thing. A lot of people are doing like virtual tours. You want to make sure that buying a home right now is going to be safe for you and your family. Even if you're doing virtual tours and you're not going physically into homes, is it going to be safe for you when you are trying to go close on your home, when you have to go to the title company? A lot of them are doing digital closings now, so that may be an option. Not every lender is doing digital closings, so pay attention to that. But is it going to be safe for you to go sign your closing documents? Is it going to be safe for you to move and get movers and be in contact with multiple people? Really, you have to decide if this is going to be something that's safe for you. Obviously, people are still moving during the pandemic. Like, if you got to move, you got to move. But really just decide, is moving right now going to be the safest for me and my family? And if you are moving right now, what measures can you take to make it safe? And are those measures going to cost you more money? So these are just things you want to think about if you're buying right now. Sixth question is, how soon are you needing to actually move? What I'm finding is with this pandemic, the loan process is becoming longer. There's longer turn times with lenders. There's longer waits for appraisal reports to come through. It's taking longer. On average, where a loan would take 30 days to close before or less, they're now taking 45 days to close. Be mindful, if you are going to buy right now, you need to have a little bit of time to kill. Are you trying to beat a lease? Do you have a certain date you have to move by? Things are running much slower now than they did before the pandemic, so keep this in mind. Are you moving into a pre-existing home, or are you having a home that's being built? I have multiple buyers that were having homes being built, and their closing date had to get pushed out because of the pandemic. They have to take more safety precautions when they're building houses now, and they may have to put a hold sometimes on some of these houses that are being built. So just keep in mind, is this something that I am going to be on a time crunch to do? Am I getting a house built? Can I wait? Do I have to move now? So if you are on a time crunch, you probably want to wait. If you have time to kill, then now may be a good time to buy for you. 7, am I a competitive buyer? If you are not a competitive buyer, meaning you don't have the best credit score, the most money saved, the highest down payment, if you are not the most competitive buyer, now may be the time for you to buy, because there is more sellers and less buyers. You don't have to compete with as many people as you did before the pandemic. So if you're buying now and you are on the weaker side of being a competitive buyer, now may be the time for you to snag your dream home, because you're going to face less competition. So if you are, strong enough of a buyer to get approved for a loan, but you're not a competitive buyer, now is your time. Number 8, you have to ask yourself, if you do decide to wait and not buy now, can you afford for rates to keep rising? Now, when it comes to rates, right before the pandemic, rates were at historical lows. It was nuts. I had people ready to refi left and right. And what happened? The virus came, the pandemic came, and it just put the stock market and mortgage rates into shambles. Now, to understand mortgage rates, you really have to understand that mortgage rates are dependent upon the stock and the bond market. If the stock and the bond market is crashing, then mortgage rates go up. If the stock and the bond market is good, mortgage rates go down. So what I've been noticing is that mortgage rates have just been fluctuating like crazy. They go up and down and up and down, but what I'm noticing is they're on a steady rise. And what I fear is people who wait too long, the rates are just going to continue to go up and up and up and up and up. Obviously, I can't predict the stock market. If I could, then I would be like rolling in dough. No one can predict what it's going to do. It may get better and go back down. It may shoot up to be the highest we've ever seen. No one knows. You almost have to take a gamble and decide, can you afford to wait if the rates continue to go up and up and up? And if you cannot afford to wait, then maybe now would be the best time to buy, because it is very possible that rates could continue to soar up. We don't know though. 9 has to do with your lender. With guidelines changing daily, you need to make sure you have a darn good loan officer, lender, whatever. Make sure you and your lender have a really good line of communication. Is this lender knowledgeable about the change in the guidelines? Will they communicate any changes with you immediately? Are they knowledgeable about how this will affect your home buying power? Like, you really just need to make sure you have a really good lender who is keeping their thumb on what's going on in the financial and the mortgage industry and the economy. Literally, I have alerts that come to my phone all throughout the day about mortgage rates. It alerts me when the rates go up, when the rates go down. I am so tuned into what the economy is doing. I watch CNN all day, every day, because what happens with the economy and the pandemic greatly affects me, and it affects my business, it affects my buyers. And so make sure that you have a lender that is informed and have their thumb on, you know, what's going on in the news, economy, in the financial world, in the mortgage industry. They need to know, because things are changing daily, and you need to know how that affects you, and they need to be able to manage how that's going to affect you. And my 10th question you need to ask yourself is, if you are to buy right now and you do lose your job, what is going to be that lender's forbearance policy? A lot of mortgage lenders right now are doing forbearance to where you don't have to pay your mortgage if you lose your job or you fall on financial hard times. Eventually, you do have to pay it, but right now you don't have to pay it. I know if it was me, I would feel more comfortable if I went with a lender that I knew that if some crazy reason I lost my job, I would be able to defer my mortgage payment for a few months if I needed to. So that may play into your decision to buy now or not. If you lose your job, will you be able to go into forbearance or no? These are things you need to make sure of when you're buying a house. Okay, so now that you've answered some questions, I'm going to give you my 5 tips for success for home buying during the pandemic. Number 1, borrow only what you need, not necessarily what you qualify for. You don't want to be house poor, and if ever there was a time not to be house poor, that is now, because there's so much uncertainty of what's going to happen with the economy and the stock market and things like that. You want to be able to save as much as you can, and you also want to have as much financial security as you can. If you're approved for a $400,000 house, maybe don't go for that. Go for like a $200,000 house. You can always upgrade after these things subside, but if you're determined to buy right now, try to stick to the lower end of what you qualify for. Number 2, use the uncertainty of the market to negotiate higher sellers concessions and lower fees. People are having harder time selling their houses right now because there's less buyers and there's more sellers. Use that to your advantage. If you have a real estate agent and they're able to negotiate you getting sellers concessions, which is also known as like the closing cost the seller gives you, or money the seller gives you towards your closing costs. So I would use this time, if it were me, to negotiate getting all my closing costs covered by the seller. Why? Because right now there's not as many buyers, and if they want to sell their house now, then they're going to have to make some concessions. And that way you don't have to worry about your closing costs. You can focus on your down payment and your moving costs and things like that. Also, I would use this time to negotiate lower fees any way that you can. So whether that's like moving fees or whether that's insurance fees, any kind of fees you can negotiate lower due to the strained nature of this time and business slowing. Do that, take advantage of that so that you can get lower costs. Number 3, have a really good emergency fund in place so that should you lose your job, should anything break on your house, that you're not going to be in debt. I fully believe you should have an emergency fund in place so that should anything go down, you aren't stressed out and you can cover it. And I would say right now, more than any other time, it is so important to have an emergency fund in place, to have that security there, and to be able to be comfortable and move into your new home and enjoy it and not be strapped financially. Really try to have a good savings built up if you're going to buy a house, or if you have bought a house or you're buying one. Try to just do everything you can to start building up that emergency fund so that you and your family can be secure during the pandemic. Number 4, go through a mortgage company instead of a bank. Banks tend to have more rigid guidelines, and with the federal government cracking down so much on underwriting guidelines right now, you would rather go to a mortgage company who has a little bit more freedom and more control over the loan process versus a bank who's going to take longer to close you, and their underwriting guidelines are already more rigid. During this pandemic, your best bet is to go to a mortgage company versus going to a bank, because it's going to give you better chances of approval, more ability to get like a lower rate and a better deal and better pricing. As a broker, we have way more control over the pricing and the loan process that the bank does not have, and we can get you close quicker, which I know is super important right now. And number 5, if you are looking to buy and you are financially secure, I would say buying an investment property is a great idea right now. Not only because the market is less competitive right now, but number 2, because that can possibly create an extra stream of income for you. If you buy an investment property and you have a renter that is locked into a lease and is paying their rent, that gives you some security. If you were to lose your job or not be able to pay your own mortgage, you have that rental income over here in order to, you know, sustain your lifestyle, pay your mortgage, take care of your family. Now, I would say, while, you know, the market's less competitive, if you have the money and you want to get an investment property, now's the time to go for it. Okay, so that is my advice for you guys. If you're wanting to buy during the pandemic, literally just make sure that you are financially secure, that you know what you're getting into, and that you'll be able to do it safely, and that your finances will be secure. That's really, I think, the biggest thing. Rates are steadily increasing, but if you are financially in a place to buy now, I would say buy now. If you are financially not in a place to buy now, if you don't have money saved, if your job security is questionable, if your credit score is questionable, I would just wait. Rates will go back down eventually. Like, the market's going to balance out eventually. Nothing stays the same forever. The mortgage industry will get to a point to where it goes back to normal, and you will be able to buy, and you won't have to deal with all of the extensive guidelines and safety measures. Really, it comes down to a personal decision for you and your family, but that is my advice if you know, you're looking into buying now. And whether you should or shouldn't is up to you, and it depends on your situation. So I'm not going to sit here and say everyone should buy now or everyone shouldn't buy now. For some people, it's going to be more beneficial for them to buy now, and for others, it's going to be more beneficial for them to not buy now. So I hope that was helpful for you guys. If you do have any questions, please leave them below. I would love to answer them. Try to avoid emailing questions or putting them in Instagram. I go straight to the comments for any mortgage questions, and that's pretty much where I go. So if you guys have any questions, leave them down below. If you learned something new, give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to become a part of the Honeybee fam, and hit the bell button so you can be notified of my new uploads. I love you to the bank and back, and I will see you in my next video.